my name is Darrel Nelson. I'm the exhibits director for Deadwood History, and I'm standing here in the Adams Museum in the section that we call Americana. There are reasons for that. One of them is that we had a number of artifacts that you see around me, and the unifying theme was their Americanness in one way or another. So you'd think, well, like baseball. What could be more American than baseball? When I was growing up, I grew up in Connecticut, and you had to choose between the Yankees and the Red Sox. And since the Red Sox were the underdog, of course I went for them. I still don't like the Yankees because they win all the time. But how American could that be? Well, actually, not that much. I grew up with it. All my friends played, I played. I've been to Cooperstown and saw where Abner Doubleday is said to have invented baseball. No, it's really an older English game with a whole bunch of different names. There was a time when an English bishop we didn't outlaw, but he said to his parishioners, you should not be playing baseball or cricket or Morris dancing on Sunday. It's long game, many different variations. And so the whole baseball mythology is really a made-up story, and baseball historians agree it's not that American, but it's the national pastime. It became American. How about football? Very overly large, fast people. Well, no, that too is English. It probably began with rugby. Early in its history, 1880s, 1890s, it was even outlawed because it was so violent and people were getting seriously hurt. There might have been even some deaths. It was played on college campuses, the Ivy League campuses, and I think it was on Harvard. They used to call it Bloody Sunday. You get the picture? So it was outlawed, and then slowly came back with more rules. Again, on Ivy League campuses, Yale, Harvard. There's a reason for the football legacy there, but it's not really an American invention. But it's now thought to be the core of an American experience. The Super Bowl, for example. How often do millions of people watch the same TV show at the same time? It's a national ritual of sorts, but it's not deeply American. However, volleyball is, because it was invented as a safer alternative to football. The truly American sport is basketball, invented by a Canadian in Springfield, Massachusetts, 1891. And it's interesting that basketball has now become an international sport. A lot of the best players come from around the world. So if we're looking for Americanness, I suppose it would be basketball, but more deeply, it's probably lacrosse, because French trappers saw native nations playing it in the New York area, New York now, long before there was white settlement there. So it's a deeply American sport in that sense. How about, what else is American? As I look behind me, I see, well, a light bulb, surely that's totally American. Well, no. Edison made it profitable and cheap, and he revolutionized it, but all the many aspects of what electricity is and came to be controllable in generating light. Long legacy with many scientists, many experimenters. So that's why you have ohms and volts and amps, because those are all derived from the scientists and experimenters in Europe who discovered those things. So Edison took advantage of a long legacy of prior inventions. Oh, I can look around me and I can see, oh, behind me is a gun. Surely, we're a vigorous gun culture. Well, as you would suppose. That was being used as a weapon, as a hunting tool in Europe for centuries before it came here with the colonists. What's deeply American about it is, for example, Samuel Colt. I grew up in Connecticut and would go past the Colt Manufacturing Company in Hartford, Connecticut. Colt totally changed the industry, got very rich at it, but he had many inventions and had to wait for some to go off copyright so he could use them. As an example of his innovation, he said, you know, all these guns don't have to be handmade. We could machine make them on assembly lines and with interchangeable parts. So he went to a gun show in London, I can't remember the date, and he had a bunch of handguns, took them all apart, and had a big pile of parts there. And as other people were watching, he put them all together and basically said, see, you can put them together with interchangeable parts. He was Henry Ford before there was Henry Ford. I could mention Henry Ford, cars. Behind me is an automobile picture, the picture of a steamer. and it was owned by our own W.E. Adams. Automobiles, likewise, were European inventions. And what happened here with people like Henry Ford made them affordable to a lot of people, and so we became the world's premier automobile culture. Now China is, but it went through the filter of American culture and became the global thing that it is. I could look around me and say any number of things here that can speak to Americanness. So for example, in this case here, we see a cowboy hat with the names of a number of rodeo legends who were here, I think it was 1967. And you think, well, surely rodeo has got to be deeply American. Well, no, not really. It came from Mexican cow moving culture, and before that Spain. So the rodeo as a national competitive sport, that's the American part of it. But in itself, it's derived from a longer legacy. To my left over there, we see in that case a uniform of Girl Scout in the 1920s. Long legacy there as well, and that is a spin-off or corollary of boy enterprise, Boy Scouts. That too is an English invention. Robert Baden-Powell, 1904 or 5, he thought that young people were just getting too weak and cityfied, so he said they need some kind of vigorous activity, and so it began there, then came to this continent, and then the Girl Scouts followed suit. So that's a long story in itself. Okay, here we have something which must be deeply just us. So we have a horn chair, cow horns, obviously. Now that makes me think of the whole cattle legacy. So imagine a picture like you've seen many times before of a stampede or cattle moving with a bunch of cowboys and tumbleweeds blow by. So if you critique that in terms of the origins, we have cows, which are all European species, and we have horses, which were ancient prehistoric animals here but went extinct and were reintroduced through Spain and the East Coast from Europe. And then we have tumbleweeds, which are in fact Russian thistles, an invasive species. So you could be scratching your head thinking, well, what actually is American? What's really ours and nowhere else? In this case, back at the end here, we have a number of arrowheads. They're American, and specifically a Folsom point, 8,000 years ago, that came from here. Is that the core of what it means to be here and nowhere else? If you're a purist, probably not, because native cultures apparently came across the Siberian land bridge, say 15,000 years ago. So is there anything that is here and nowhere else? Well, yes. Go back to where I started, and we can look at our plesiosaur, which we have the real thing down there. This is a plaster model of it. That's the only one known to science. Plesiosaurs of that sort were only here. You might think another one of its, not really a cousin, but a sort of a relative would be T-Rexes. There's only 15 or so found in the world. That whole story about T-Rexes and all the novels and movies and so on, it comes from that few, and they're all from here to Montana. So those are as truly American as you can be, here and nowhere else. If you're really interested in things that are made in America only, I would refer you to Bill Bryson's book. Like everything that he writes, it's very entertaining and very informative, and he lists in his own way things that only happen here, such as shopping malls and fast food and other things that we might have second thoughts about. A lot happened here. I could have mentioned a telegraph because that was invented here, Samuel Morse, and I have read various historians suggest that that is the pivotal, the most shocking technological transition in history. Before that, everything moved no faster than the speed of horse, and suddenly things can be instantaneous over hundreds of miles. And thereafter, all of our computer technology is really carrying out of that one innovation. What this says to me is that Americanness, or what's ours distinctively, is not really a very useful question. We as a nation have been involved in a very active dialogue with our ancestry and nations all around the world. and we can no longer, well, I suppose we can claim that this is ours and only ours, but it's not helpful. So when I look at the artifacts in here, it reminds me that our story is very much everyone else's story. We make our own contribution. It's if the American contribution is what we add to the dialogue through history. So the very last thought that I take from this, especially as it applies to our situation now, is that whatever else we see, whatever we're doing, we are in this thing together. Thank you.